Hello, my dear students! Welcome to our virtual class in Practical Research 1. The following are the different most essential learning competencies and specific objectives that you have to achieve at the end of the lesson.
In order for us to understand data and ways to systematically collect data, we have to first know about the different qualitative research designs. Qualitative research designs are good at answering how and what questions. The word research design is more difficult to define in qualitative research than it is in quantitative research, with words like research methodology, research approach, and research style being used instead. When it comes to qualitative research design is the process of transforming a research concept into a research project or plan that can then be carried out in practice by a research or research team. Research designs are types of inquiry that provide specific directions for procedures in a research study. A qualitative research design describes, either explicitly or implicitly, the purpose of the qualitative research, the role of the researchers, and the stages of research and the method of data analysis. Therefore, a qualitative research design or approach is a general way of thinking about conducting qualitative research. The following are the 6 common qualitative research designs, namely ethnography, case study, phenomenology, grounded theory, historical approach, and narrative inquiry. The first qualitative research design is ethnography. It came from the word ethno, which means people, and graphy, which means writing. When we say ethnography, it understands human behavior in the cultural context in which it is embedded. It also understands the way in which people live from the emic or insider's perspective versus the ethic or the researchers or outsiders' perspectives. And it describes shared meaning and practices. Ethnography comes from the field of anthropology, which is the study of human races, origins, societies, and culture. Originally, culture was tied to the notion of ethnicity and geographic location, but it has been broadened to include virtually any group or organization like business or a defined group. In ethnography, you immerse in the target participant's environment to understand the goals, cultures, challenges, motivations, and themes that emerge. Ethnography as a qualitative research design can be described according to its purpose, method, analysis, and outcomes as shown in the slide. The second type of qualitative research design is a case study. A case study provides a more in-depth examination of a subject while still using more data collection procedures. It also investigates a contemporary phenomenon within its real-life context. And it can be explanatory, exploratory, or describing an event. A case study is considered to be an intensive study of a specific individual or specific context. There is no single way to conduct it, and a combination of methods can be used. A case study uses an interpretative research. It is chosen precisely because researchers are interested in insight and discover rather than the testing of a hypothesis. Case study involves deep understanding through multiple types of data sources. The characteristics of a case study can be summarized as follows. In phenomenology, it aims to investigate a phenomenon or a person's experiences. It also seeks to understand the essence or structure of a phenomenon from the perspective of those who have experienced it. Phenomenology describes the meaning of the lived experiences from the perspective of the participant. It also emphasizes a focus on people's subjective experiences and interpretations of the world. In this kind of research design, small samples are used and very open questions need to be asked. The most often used data collections are interviews or speech, diaries, drawings, and observation. The features of phenomenology as a qualitative research design are summarized as follows. The fourth type of qualitative research design is grounded theory. It generates and modifies a theory about the processes that are being studied in a natural environment. It also attempts to classify the situation's central and subsidiary processes. The main goal of a grounded theory is to develop a theory about the processes under investigation in a natural setting. It is very useful in areas where little is known or when a new perspective is needed. Grounded theory as a qualitative research design can be described as follows. The next type is historical approach. In this qualitative research design, it describes how historians conduct research and write histories in the form of accounts of the past using primary sources and other facts, such as archaeological evidence. Historiography examines events of the past, and historians believe that the greatest value of historical knowledge is an increased self-understanding. The historical approach is employed by researchers who are interested in reporting events or conditions that occurred in the past. An attempt is made to establish facts in order to arrive at conclusions concerning past events or predict future events, according to Key of 1997. The qualities of historical approach as a qualitative research design can be summarized as follows. Lastly, we have narrative inquiry. It involves telling stories about people's experiences and the significance they derive from them. The final story is created by the participant, researcher, and reader. Narrative research is a useful way of gaining access to feelings, thoughts, and experiences in order to analyze them. Narratives are rarely simple or linear, and they often consist of many different stories rather than of a clearly defined tale. In order for you to identify the group of people that you are interested in and from which you want to draw a sample, the number of people that you need in your sample, and how you will select these people, then you have to understand sample and sampling procedure. But first, let's define the terms population and sample. When we say population, it is generally a large collection of individuals or objects that is the main focus of scientific query. For example is the senior high school students in a school. But when we say sample, it refers to a portion or part of the population that is the representative of the population from which it was selected. It can be the senior high school students from the Hume Strand. Now let's study about sampling. When we say sampling, it is a process of selecting units like people or organizations from a population of interest so that by studying the sample, we may fairly generalize our results back to the population from which they were chosen. It can be explained as a specific principle used to select members of the population to be included in the study. Sampling falls into two major categories, which are probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is a method in which every member of the population has a known chance of participating in the study. However, in non-probability sampling, not each member has a chance to participate in the study in this method. There are different types of sampling method under probability and non-probability method. Under probability, it can be simple random, systematic random, stratified random, cluster, and multi-stage probability sampling. However, under non-probability sampling method, it can be quota, purposive, volunteer, convenience, and snowball sampling method. Let us discuss first the different probability sampling method. When we say simple random sampling, it is the purest form under the probability approach since it provides equal chances of being picked for each member of the target population. One way to do it is through lottery method. The second one is systematic random sampling. A list of every member of the population is created, and from that list, the first sample element is randomly selected from the first k element on the population list. An example of this is in the sample in which it will include every 10th member of the list so that the 10th, 20th, 30th, and so on will be selected to be the members of the same group. Next is stratified random sampling. It involves the use of stratum or a subset of the target population wherein the members possess one or more common attribute. With stratified sampling, the population is divided into groups based on some characteristics. Then, within each group, a probability sample is selected. In stratified sampling, the groups are called strata. Example of this is mothers, fathers, students, teachers, males, females, and others. In cluster sampling, every member of the population is assigned to one and only one group. Each member is called a cluster. A sample cluster is chosen using a probability method. Only individuals within sampled clusters are surveyed. Lastly, we have the multi-stage sampling. It uses a combination of the different sampling methods. For example is, in stage 1, you may use cluster sampling, then step 2, you may use random sampling. Now, let's discuss about the different non-probability sampling method. Let's start with quota sampling. It identifies strata like stratified sampling, but it also uses convenience sampling approach as the researcher will be the one to choose the necessary number of participants per stratum. Typically, the researcher is attempting to gather data from a certain number of participants that meet certain characteristics. The second one is the purposive or purposeful sampling. It is the most common sampling strategy. In this type of sampling, participants are selected or sought based on pre-selected criteria based on the research questions. For example, the study may be attempting to collect data from lymphoma patients in a particular city or country. The sample size may be predetermined or based on theoretical saturation, which is the point at which the newly collected data no longer provides additional insights. The third is volunteer sampling. It is made up of people who self-selected into the survey. Often, these folks have a strong interest in the main topic of the survey. In the noontime show, It's Showtime, when they ask viewers to join the online poll or vote for the winner in Tawag ng Tanghalan, this can be used as an example of this sampling method. Next, we have convenience sampling. It is made up of people who are easy to reach. This non-probability sampling method is used when there are only a few available members of the target population who can become the participants in the study. For example, a researcher interviews a shopper at a local mall. If the mall was chosen because it was a convenient site from which to solicit survey participants, and or it was close to the researcher's home or business, this would be a convenience sample. Lastly, we have snowball sampling. It is a special non-probability method used when the desired sample characteristic is rare. It is also known as chain referral sampling. In this method, the participants refer to the researcher to others who may be able to potentially contribute or participate in the study. It may be extremely difficult or cost prohibitive to locate respondents in these situations. This method often helps researchers find and recruit participants that may otherwise be hard to reach. There are three main types of qualitative sampling, which are purposive or purposeful sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. The following are the different steps in sampling. First, identify the population of interest. If you want to focus your study on the reasons why teenagers are dropping out from schools, then what will be your population of interest? When choosing your population of interest, you should think who will be directly affected from this study and who will be the potential participants. In this case, Your population of interest should be teachers and out-of-school youth. However, if it is still too broad to say that teachers and youth will be your population because there are lots of schools in our province alone, therefore, we need to proceed to the next step. The next step is specify a sampling frame. It is very difficult to say that your population will be teachers and out-of-school youth. Teachers from what school? Out-of-school youth from what place? If we simply say that those are your population, then it will be difficult for us to identify who will be your respondents. Therefore, we need to specify who we want to include in our study. You may want to choose your sampling frame to a place where you are residing so that it will be easier for you to gather participants. The third step is specify a sampling method. There are many types of sampling method for qualitative research. There are some which are the most common and easiest sampling method to be used. You can either choose one method to use or have a mix of two or more methods. The fourth step is determine your sample size. There can be two approaches to determine your sample size. First, you determine the sample size depending on whether your data will reach its saturation point. In qualitative studies, sampling typically continues until information redundancy or saturation occurs. Informational redundancy or saturation is the point at which no new information or themes are emerging from the data. Therefore, in qualitative studies, it is critical that data collection and analysis are occurring simultaneously so that the researcher will know when the saturation point is reached. It is important to understand that the saturation point may occur prematurely if the researcher has a narrow sampling frame, a skewed analysis of the data, or poor methodology. Because of this, the researcher must carefully create the research question, select an appropriate target group, eliminate his or her own biases, and analyze data continuously and thoroughly throughout the process to bring validity to the data collected. Another way to choose sample size depends on the type of approach that you are going to use for your research. It was cited by Creswell of 2013 that 1 to 10 subjects are recommended for phenomenology. Dukes of 1984 stated that there should be 20 to 30 individuals for grounded theory, and Charmas of 2006 indicated that there should be 4 to 5 participants for case studies and a single culture-sharing group for ethnography. Therefore, your sample size is the number of individuals that you are going to use for your study, and it is up to you to determine which approach you are going to use in choosing your sample size. The last step is implement the plan. If you follow the steps correctly, with a little help and guidance, you can now implement your sampling techniques and select participants that can be a part of your research. It is important to take note of all the details because you need to write it down in your research paper.
That's all about our lesson for this week in Practical Research 1. Thank you for watching and see you again next week.